What's up, guys? Welcome to a new day. I'm Stephanie Ryder, and this is the 365 Shares podcast. It's March 2nd, and today's topic is Trait 3. The Big Red Book says we are frightened by angry people and any personal criticism. The passage in the Strengthening My Recovery book talks about growing up with volatility and the impact that this has on us in our adult lives. If we grew up in families where parents would fly off the handle, have an oversized reaction to something small, flip out, call us names, yell, scream, not just get angry or have a bad day, but get enraged, be scary. This is what causes a lot of people to identify with the trait that we are scared of angry people and being criticized. And the book talks about those people who you can almost see flinching when any type of conflict comes their way. Whether this is you or you've witnessed this in someone else, you probably know what I'm talking about. The person for me that comes to mind is my brother. He gets so uncomfortable when there's any kind of conflict. He doesn't want to deal with anything directly. He prefers if he's having an issue with someone to ask someone else to deal with it for him, which sometimes creates its own problems. But I know a lot of that came from growing up with very volatile parents and also being raised by an extremely volatile grandfather. But if we work the ACA program, we start to find our voice. We start to realize that we still have an inner child who's still scared of other adults, but we are also now an adult and we can protect that inner child. And we can bypass that fear of conflict and learn to stand up for ourselves and learn to step in front of our inner child and protect them and say, you know what, as a child, I didn't have a choice when I experienced that behavior, but now I'm an adult and I can tell you that I'm not going to tolerate that. So whether that means walking out of a conflict, whether that means finding a job that better suits you, that has less volatile people in it, whether that means setting boundaries in relationships or even ending relationships, whatever you have to do to protect that inner child. Because even if no one protected us when we were kids, we can protect ourselves now as adults. I'm Steph, and this is my share. The affirmation from the Strengthening My Recovery book says, on this day, I will remember that another person's anger is not mine. If I hear criticism, I can separate truth from fiction. This really made me think of my family of origin. I definitely internalized a lot of volatility from my parents and my grandparents. And I don't think I'm the person who's as much scared of criticism or angry people. I think I'm more the other side of the laundry list where I am the scary people. And I'm not mad at myself for that. I've really tried to work on it to be less scary, to be less volatile, because I want to make sure that I can have relationships with anyone in my life who I want to have relationships with, whether that's family members, romantic partners, friends, coworkers. I don't want to be seen as that person who flies off the handle or overreacts. But I saw so much of that growing up. My parents fought constantly before they separated. It seemed like every night after dinner, all the kids would go upstairs and watch TV, and my parents would just scream at each other for hours. And there was never any resolution to their fights. I don't even know what they were mad about. They were just both hurting adult children who didn't know how to get the safety and security that they were looking for. And the love, romantic, high version of their relationship had worn off. And they had kids. They had a long commute to work. They had a business that they were running. They had a lot of pressure on them, and they really didn't know how to deal with it. And they tried couples counseling, but they didn't have a very good counselor, in my opinion. He made some decisions and gave some advice that ended very badly for them, unfortunately. So my parents did try, but they were just extremely volatile, and it got worse until they were unable to hurt each other anymore. The passage also reminded me of my grandfather, and my family sort of joked a lot after his death that he was the type of person who would go nuts if you spilled your milk at the dinner table, but if you crashed your car and almost died, he would come to the hospital and say, I'm just so glad that you're safe. Because he really cared about his family, his children. He wanted to make sure that everyone was happy and successful, but he had so much untreated PTSD that he didn't know how to deal with, that if anything little happened that set him off, he would just go nuts. And my brother was the brunt of a lot of that. He was very hard on my brother. He was always trying to make him do more yard work or do his schoolwork better. There were so many little things that he wanted us to do to be perfect. If you said yeah instead of yes, he corrected you at the dinner table. If you didn't use your fork and your knife correctly, he would comment on that. If you asked him if you could do something with your friends on Friday night and you were asking him on a Wednesday, he would ask why you didn't ask if you could do it last Friday. And obviously when you're kids, you don't always have that much visibility into your schedule, but like you never could ask him early enough to satisfy him if you could do something in the future. If our friends called while we were eating dinner, he would get mad and yell at them. And unfortunately, I had a girlfriend who would just always still call at dinner. I don't know what her problem was, but she would like call at dinner all the time. And I would have to get up and answer it and like tell her we were having dinner. And then my grandfather would get mad at me. But my brother really got the brunt of it, I think. He was hardest on my brother probably because he was a boy. And my grandfather just had this idea of like how men are supposed to act. And my brother hadn't gotten a lot of one-on-one attention or direction or nurturing from my parents when we were growing up. So I think my grandfather thought he had to like mold him and shape him into a quote unquote better human being. One of the examples that I remember is we had a long driveway with a circle at the end of it near the house that you could drive all the way around and then out. We lived in Pennsylvania. We got a lot of snow in the winter. My grandfather had a riding lawnmower that had a snow plow attachment he could put on the front in the winter. But it wasn't powerful enough always to get through a lot of snow, especially with my grandfather sitting on it. So I remember he would ride this lawnmower with the snowplow attached to the front of it and try to get through the snow. But if he couldn't get through the snow on his own, he would make my brother, who was in middle school and high school, stand behind him and push. And not only would he make my brother push him around the driveway on the snowplow while my grandfather was sitting on it, but he would scream and curse at him the whole time, like he wasn't doing it hard enough or fast enough, sort of like mushing a sled dog. And that's a really messed up thing to do to a kid. He could have let my brother sit on it and he could have pushed. He could have invested in a better snowplow. I think we probably would have had the money for that. It was just this battle of like, he had to do this and my brother had to help him and my brother was never doing a good enough job. So it was this like forced manual labor plus screaming that happened anytime it snowed. I will admit that I didn't have the best relationship with my brother. I would stand in my bedroom window, which was on the second floor, and watch this happening sometimes. This is so awful. And if my brother ever listens to this, I'm so sorry. I really do love you. But I would stand up in the front of my window and laugh because he was having to do that and I didn't have to, which is what happens in dysfunctional families, right? There's like favoritism, dysfunctional family roles. There's the hero and the scapegoat and the golden child and the lost child. And in that moment, I was kind of the golden child because I just got to stay inside and be warm. And my brother was the scapegoat because he was the manual labor. He was a slave and not getting treated well while that was happening either. And then I found out later as an adult that after I had gone to college and after my brother was in college, then my sister, my younger sister, who was the baby of the family, was the one who would have to push him around on the snowplow. So, I mean, just a messed up situation all around. You have to laugh because it's so dark. Really, by a lot of today's standards, I think this would be considered abusive, but it happened. It is what it is. So I understand when my brother is flinchy when there's conflict because he earned that. He suffered a lot of abuse and, verbal abuse and physical chores that were sort of beyond what really should be expected of a kid. But that's what happens when we're adult children. And I don't really know how to wrap this up other than to say to my brother and sister, who may or may not ever listen to this, I'm sorry you had that experience. I'm sorry I didn't have that experience. And I hope that you can heal from it.